Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we continue our celebration of both Shark Week with the sequel to the most beloved shark movie of all time, Jaws 2. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have. So warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, screenwriter of the new 3DS game TMNT, based on the movie. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, lead singer of the band Deserts of Mars and co-creator of the comic Psycom from Tokyopop and Clockworks from Humanoids. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin is Mr. Drew Edwards, writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man from Monsterverse Comics. Say hello.
Mr. I rate Mr. now. Well, this is a banner day, I think.
Next week it'll be Monsieur. Monsieur.
Continental. Very nice.
And you know, and by the way, those are on Comixology. In fact, I need to go out today and get the next issue because I haven't read it yet. And finally, as always, joining us from Denver, color commentary from attorney Julia Guzman. Say hello.
That's Madame to you.
Madame. Madame Julia Guzman. Okay. Jaws 2 is a 1978 American horror thriller and the first sequel to Steven Spielberg's Jaws, and the second installment in the Jaws franchise, which was based on Peter Benchley's novel of the same name. Directed by Jeannot Schwark, it stars Roy Scheider as police chief Martin Brody, who must deal with another great white shark terrorizing the waters of Amity Island, a fictional seaside resort. Scheider, who only reprised his role to end a contractual issue with Universal Studios, was also unhappy during production and had a bunch of heated exchanges with the director. Jaws 2 remained on Variety's list of top 10 box office hits of all time until the mid-90s, so for nearly 20 years, and was briefly the highest-grossing sequel in history until Star Wars Empire Strikes Back came out in 1980. The film's tagline, "Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water," has become one of the most famous taglines in film history and has been parodied and homaged many times. It is widely regarded as being the best Jaws sequel, which is a complicated thought. So, first impressions. I wanted to, let's go. We'll do the opposite of last week. Let's go Julia, Drew, Tony, and then I'll give you something. First impressions, and what I really want to know here is, does this movie, you know, I'd love to hear if you're familiar with it at all or if this is your first time to it, but does this movie fail or succeed at being a sequel to Jaws, whatever that might be? I want to know your feelings, your first impressions. So let's go and try to keep it short, and then we will get into it. Julia, Drew, Tony, and Jason. Julia?
I think it succeeds, and I say that because I watched them back to back, and I completely mixed them up. Like last week I was talking about Jaws, and I ended up using something from Jaws 2 by accident. So obviously I just kind of think of it as one big two-part movie, which means it must succeed. I think it's fun, and I spent most of the 80s watching Days of Our Lives, and the hotel owner in this movie is the guy who plays Stefano DiMera, who was on Days of Our Lives for like 40 years, I don't know, 30 years. Anyway, so to me, he's Stefano DiMera, which of course is just bonus. So I will call him Stefano DiMera for the remainder of the
right?
of the podcast. What?
Joe Mascolo.
Yeah, Joe Mascolo. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Outstanding. So that's one up. Drew, fail, succeed, first impressions.
Well, before I get into that, I want to say I think that's our first Days of Our Lives reference here on the Castle of Horror podcast.
Well, I'll have to make sure and
I don't know.
Bring
I
that up
as
often as possible.
I could be wrong. We're at 99 now, so we've done a lot of these.
Yeah.
Okay. So, does it succeed as a sequel to Jaws? Yeah, I don't think it's nearly as good. It is passable enough entertainment. There's a lot of things that I think are actually really cool. I like the kind of Two-Face look they give the shark. I think that's really cool. Some of the action sequences are really cool. I actually think Roy Scheider is pretty good here, even though apparently, he did not want to be in this movie. It's fun. It's my favorite of the Jaws sequels. I actually can't stand the other two. This is a movie I revisit every so often, so I can't say that I hate it. But yeah, it's not great, but I mean, what's going to seem great when you stack it up against Jaws? I mean, it's Jaws, for crying out loud.
Wow, that's really strong. Okay, thank you. Tony, fail, succeed, first impressions.
I think it's all right. I kind of think, like, if you can tell that they're like, oh man, what we need to cash in on are these things. Like, there's more teenagers in it, you know.
Yeah.
It's definitely more of a horror movie. Like, straight up, things happen. If I were to,
except it's not as scary.
yes, but it definitely has all the beats where it's trying to be a horror movie, or wants, you know.
Yeah. No, that's true.
If I were to watch something like this, to be honest with you, I think anything past Jaws, like, I kind of would rather have watched Piranha, like, because it's a little bit more fun, and it does practically the same beats, like, but I mean, it's good. It's not a bad movie. Again, it is unfortunate that it is stacked up against its predecessor, like the original. Like, a sequel is a tough thing when it's that good, you know.
Yeah.
I think this one's good. I definitely don't think it's great. There's more fun, you know, things attacking you in the water movies that came out after Jaws that I think are better, but this is, I mean, it's good. Again, it's an okay sequel that is unfortunately, you know, the first one's so good, like, did we need a sequel? I don't know. But by the way, my first, as a bit of trivia though, my first exposure to Jaws 2 was because my grandmother got Reader's Digest condensed books.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, Jaws 2, I'm sure one happened at some point, but the one she had was Jaws 2.
Hilarious.
In amongst some really non-Jaws books in
Absolutely.
thing. Like,
I loved that series when I was a kid.
Reader's Digest condensed books.
Oh,
I actually read the Peter Benchley Jaws in Reader's Digest condensed books. Absolutely.
Yeah, but what a weird concept too. Like, you know, when you don't have time to read, so we're going to help you with this. We're going to edit these down a little bit.
It's
make
pretty
sure it's
Cliff
not so
Notes.
wordy.
Then I went from Reader's Digest condensed books to Cliff Notes, so I kind of have gone downhill.
I really think the only reason Reader's Digest condensed books are not around today is because people have simply stopped reading. But as a concept, I'm a novelist, and I'm all for the notion of condensed. I love it. I think it's great, you know, because if people are like, I don't have time to read, but if you send me like the highlights of the major books of the past 3 months, I will totally read that. Great. I'm really impressed with that, and I kind of, I don't know, it's such a wonderful piece of like you know, that whole 60s and 70s era that it makes me sad that it's all gone, you know, and so wow. But yes, I read Jaws, the Peter Benchley novel, in the Reader's Digest version. I'm sure I didn't miss anything. Who knows?
That's
I mean,
funny.
it's like 30 years ago, so who knows? Okay. What I was thinking about through this whole thing is that this movie really crystallizes for me some answers to questions about, like, what fails in a sequel, and you know what it is that a sequel has to do to be a successful sequel. And further, I want to approach it from the perspective that I do believe that a good sequel is possible. I think if you have a great movie, a truly great movie, I still believe that a truly great sequel can be done. But if you don't do it right and you do a merely competent movie, what you wind up with is a movie that disappoints people, you know, but might be, as you point out, a perfectly okay adventure. In other words, if it were called something else, nobody would know the difference. But so what is this? This is Jaws 2. It has none of the elegance of Jaws. It has none of the focus. You know, it has none of the simplicity. It has way more characters. You know, it's constantly jarring from one place to the next. And it's still high class enough not to be that exploitative. You know, so the coolest scenes of this movie, there are a couple of like really cool scenes, and then of course the rest of it, to entertain you, has some like really basic horror shocks, which is great. So my feeling of it is that it's a perfectly okay adventure, but I'm much more interested in the reason of why does it fail so utterly to be a worthy successor to Jaws. And by the way, it does. I think it just fails like magnificently. Like you couldn't imagine how to look at Jaws and come up with something that so completely misses the mark as to what made Jaws worth watching. So, but and Drew, you feel the opposite. You actually like this one, and
I do.
Yeah,
I hate Jaws 3D and I hate Jaws: The Revenge. I hate them with a fiery passion. Although I want to say one thing. It's funny you talk about this being classy.
Yeah.
I don't think this is a classy film at all. I think this is definitely the B-movie version of Jaws. In fact, when I was watching it, the one thing I could think of, and I hadn't thought about this until this time watching this, that with all the teenagers kind of cruising around in their boats and everything, and like it has this odd feeling of almost being like one of the Friday the 13th sequels that came out years later.
Screaming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's true.
The wonderful B-movie screaming at the end.
There are teenagers being picked off. That's the truth. But
like this is a lot like if the first movie is a monster movie with a shark as the monster, this is like a slasher movie with a shark as the slasher.
Mm-hmm.
There are now I'll say that I like the thing that I like the most about this movie, and we'll go into it, is I like the kids. I think the teenagers are really, they're like in their own movie about just pure survival. I mean, they're like the cleverest kids I've ever seen. They can do crap that I would have to go back to school for like 10 years to learn to do half the stuff these kids do. And they're just wonderful. They're like the best Boy Scouts I have ever seen. But the original movie is so darn simple. You've got these three people. You've got the lawman, you've got the man of science, and you've got the man of tradition, and together they go out on a boat to capture a shark that is terrorizing a small village. It is pure and simple. There's and the movie is made up of shark kills people, lawman finally gathers the team, we go kill the shark. That's it. It never leaves the shoulders of Chief Brody. He is essentially the real identity of the movie. The science man and the myth man are probably really both just facets of Roy Scheider's personality. He carries the entire film, and he's the only one to survive. It never deviates from that, except for a couple of times to show people getting killed. This movie, in comparison, has no sense whatsoever of its identity. None. I mean, it's unless you think this is an utterly different thing. They're like, Jason, we don't want to talk about that. In this, we want to talk about the identity of what it is to be young on an island. I don't know. And I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying that it doesn't capture at all what the original was. But
could you retell that story though? Like I don't think that would have worked.
Okay, so we should probably talk more about what actually happens in this one, rather than it's a good point. Because what I'm saying is, what I'm saying might not work. I mean, because to some extent what I'm saying is you need somebody to give a big mythic speech, like the Indianapolis speech. And you need somebody to be the voice of science. And you need somebody to be the voice of the law. In other words, what I'm saying is I really want a remake of Jaws, I think, more than a sequel of Jaws.
You did hit a nail on the head about something like this. This movie is not mythic. You see the shark a lot.
Yeah.
Whereas the shark is almost like a force in the first one. They talk about the shark more than the shark is actually seen, or you'll see the havoc the shark has wrought, but you really you don't, even when the shark is attacking somebody, you see blood in the water, but you don't see the shark. You may see they kind of, there's a couple of moments in this where they there's a great visual at one point where you see the top of the tail and the top of the fin as the shark swims by, and you see the outline of Amity in the kind of the foreground. Yeah. And that's very mythic, but the rest of this movie, not so much.
Yeah, it is very it's very, I don't even know what the word, prosaic would probably be the word, just a regular, story and without the myth there. And maybe that's deliberate. And I'm trying to think, how could you do the things that I'm asking for and still make it a sequel? What would be a different mythic speech, tragic speech about the shark? I don't know. I mean, I don't know the answers to those questions.
I mean, if you think about like Terminator 2, I think that's kind of the perfect
Terminator 2 is
perfect
right.
sequel, and it really does do all the things you're asking. I mean, I haven't analyzed it specifically, but I feel like it has all those things in it.
Yeah.
Well, even though it's got a different feel, Aliens as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a few that live up to it. This one just really did seem like, well, teens are really into this now. Let's do this.
Yes. Yeah, I think that there probably is a certain amount of just pure old-fashioned exploitation, and I think maybe if it were even more exploitative, I may have liked it even more. I don't know.
Well, what do people remember about this movie? The big thing they remember is the opening sequence where you see the girl on the skis being stalked by the shark, and you see the fin and everything, and that whole scene is very, very, monster movie, very, very exploitation movie. And, people remember the tagline, which is a great exploitation movie tagline for a movie that was actually a big studio picture.
That's right. And once you get into the realm of exploitation pictures, once you're really there, you get rid of all the pretense of having, meaningful speeches about man in the sea like Robert Shaw was giving, and you're just in the realm of kids in bathing suits getting attacked by animals. All right, so let's actually start. Before we get to that thing, the point, the boating accident, which I think is fantastic. That's a great scene that you're talking about. This movie actually begins with a wonderfully creepy scene where a couple of scuba divers are down below and they come across a boat, and we slowly reveal that the boat is actually the wrecked Orca, which is the boat that Quint and Brody and Richard Dreyfuss's character Hooper.
And that's the thing that I had screwed up last week, when I said that some divers went missing, and no, there were no divers that went missing in the first movie, just in this one.
Well, but there's a lot of similarities here. I mean, I can totally see what you're talking about, where you could completely forget which movie you were looking at, because so far this totally does feel like something that might have happened in the original Jaws.
Yeah, well, except for they're looking at the Orca, which of course.
Right, they're looking at the Orca, and but what we were comparing it to was when Hooper goes and swims around the wrecked fishing boat.
Yep.
That in the first movie, but these two divers get attacked by a shark, and luckily they're carrying a camera, and the flash bulb goes off. And that's the beginning of Jaws 2. And we know immediately that there's a shark and there's going to be some evidence. So
except that doesn't so much pan out.
Well, I well said. I mean, that's true. We go immediately now to a grand ball that where Joe Mascolo, Stefano DiMera of Days of Our Lives, is buddying up to all the politicians, and he now is the employer of the chief's wife. And so, we'll just call her Mrs. Brody, because I can't remember her name.
Yeah, Ellen.
Ellen Brody. So Ellen Brody has this job working for the slick Italian Joe Mascolo, and they're basically bringing lots of money into the community. And everybody is vaguely embarrassed by the chief, which I find fascinating. The chief is late. The chief is kind of uncouth. It's just so strange that after apparently 4 years after the chief literally saved everybody on the island, they still treat him like some sort of uncouth cousin.
Yeah, they should treat him like a hero.
It's like how everybody forgets Jack Bauer saves people.
Oh, totally. Well, but see, Jack Bauer.
Everybody's like,
that's
man, should we trust this dude? I don't know.
Tony, I got to disagree with you there. That's a little different, because Jack Bauer is like, I mean, he will, if it suits his purposes, he will kill a whole bunch of people and torture a whole bunch of people, and it's like he totally operates outside the law. So that one I understand a little bit more than this one, where
he saves them every time. I mean, I understand your differences, but when you're telling, anyway. But it just always reminds me of that, where people are like, should we trust him? I don't know. I guess the guy saved the world and stuff. But sure, if you want to hate him, that's cool. I guess everything's like that. I don't know.
Well, it's so funny because the somewhere along here, Chief Brody is going to take the mayor aside and go, I think that we've got a shark problem, and the mayor's like, that's ridiculous.
How can we have shark problems? How can we have shark problems?
I can't believe this mayor. It's like he's got amnesia or something.
This town never has shark problems ever.
It's so crazy.
No, I think that's part of it. When you talked about whether or not it works as a sequel, the problem is it doesn't deviate quite enough. I mean, it's really, to me, its biggest flaw is just it's not memorable.
Yeah.
Like, you watch it just kind of goes by, some things happen, some interesting shark bits happen. But, in general, it hits most of the beats from the first one, but not as well. Yeah. And then the beats, that it changes, you've seen already in other horror movies coming out at the time, because they've already, been doing this. And so I think that's a big thing of, why it's not a bad movie by any stretch. I mean, there's tons worse movies, but as far as, it doesn't establish itself as whoa, Jaws 2, holy moly, And what Terminator 2 does, where, you see, Arnold comes on, you're like, oh no, this is bad. Hey, look, he's the good guy. Sorry, spoilers on that old movie too.
Well, and Terminator 2 winds up, first of all, being an extremely elegant film. I mean, Terminator 2 is an extremely, you and I learned to plot just by watching Terminator 2, basically, and seeing how it's really made up of just 7 simple scenes. If this movie were made up of 7 simple sequences, it would be a much cleaner film. As it is right now, you're right. It just sort of jumbles from one place to the next. I got to say, one of the most interesting things, Brody not being believed is absurd in the continuity of Jaws.
Well, it really bothers me that the character of the mayor has not progressed. That is the one thing I have to say. He basically, Brody has changed. He does hit some of the same, but he comes off like a guy that has some post-traumatic stress issues. There's some character development with Brody, whereas the character of the mayor, he's essentially the exact same character that he was in the first movie, and that really bothers me. And in fact,
you don't need him to be, because you've already got Joe Mascolo. The mayor could be the guy who is helping. You can have the mayor.
There was actually a scene that they cut out, and I was really upset on learning this. I was looking at special features where they actually showed the gathering of the town fathers, and he's the only one the mayor is the only one that votes to keep Brody on as the chief of police, and everybody else votes to fire him. And that scene alone would have given him some kind of arc, this guy, he was a hero and he has our town's best interest, and we really should keep him around because we need a voice of dissent. But they didn't keep that in, and I'm like, man, that would have made.
You're right.
That would have
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
That would have made a huge difference.
Some kind of scene where the mayor gets dressed down for backing him up or something. Yeah.
If they really wanted to make this something different or do something not along the same path, is make it so that he's also disgusted that the shark has become a selling point of the town. And so it's just really disgusting. There's a dude spinning signs who's dressed as a shark, and all this stuff where you're come see the shark. Oh, look, giant shark teeth and all that. And they're just man, we should probably really not celebrate that. But everybody's woo, we made less money.
Were we really at that sort of self-referential point with horror films, though, at this? It sounds like something that would have come out more in the 80s.
Well, but it would happen. The thing is, it's believable that would happen.
Oh no, it's absolutely. It's absolutely. I mean, anyone who's lived in Dallas knows that they've turned the JFK assassination into tourism. I mean, totally is realistic.
I think it's completely possible because I saw an episode of Andy Griffith like that, and that was back in the 60s.
But the first director, John Hancock, actually had made it had Amity being near a ghost town. And so he wanted all the stores to be boarded up and everything. So rather than have it be a tourist thing, it was more like nobody ever went there, and so it just had fallen apart. But part of the problem was when they filmed the town scenes, they filmed in Martha's Vineyard, even though the ocean scenes are filmed in Florida, a lot of them anyway. But the town scenes are filmed in Martha's Vineyard, and people didn't want to board up their houses in Martha's Vineyard and their stores. They're like, no. And also, they just didn't like the people who were seeing the dailies didn't like how it looked. Like they felt like it wasn't the right tone. And then that guy ended up getting fired for various reasons, and so they ended up doing it differently. But that
he was actually the director that Roy Scheider had arguments with. The second guy that they brought on actually.
Well, Roy Scheider didn't want to do the movie, and they kind of forced him to do it because he had a contract for more movies. So
he looks great.
I think it was really that he secretly wore a shark costume while he was directing, like when he was sitting behind the camera. That's what
I'm amazed at what they've done with Scheider here. You know, Scheider is fitter. He's he's leaner. He's more muscular around the arms. He's not wearing his glasses. He's so they're making Roy Scheider for some reason. They've decided to make Roy Scheider into the closest they can make a 50-year-old matinee idol. I don't know, and I'm not mocking it. I think he looks great, but he doesn't have anybody to act against, so it doesn't even matter. You don't really see him.
Yeah.
Except these stupid old guys in these three-piece suits. I got to say, by the way, that theme, though, of arguing that there's a monster out there and nobody believes you, the wonderful thing is that really is a big part of American film history. I mean, traditionally that would be the teenager, some sort of outsider, some person who lives outside of the authority of the town. Steve McQueen in The Blob, and
Well, he is in the original.
Yeah, that's right. Except for that he's a cop. He's a cop, but he's an outsider cop. And here, he's still an outsider guy. But the innovation of this series is that he's an outsider, but he's also an insider. He's one of the town. He's one of the town fathers, although he's a servant of them. And as we'll see, he will get fired. Okay, so blah blah blah. We meet Roy Scheider's friends. There's a bunch of interchangeable teenagers who all know an awful lot about boating, and Michael, the teenage son of Brody. So basically, we're following the Brody plot, and then we follow the Michael plot. The Michael plot is Michael is a teenager who is home for the summer, and he doesn't want to get a job, and his mom doesn't think he needs to get a job because she thinks, oh, my son works so hard at whatever it is that he does the rest of the year, let him take the summer off and sail with his buddies. Great. And so we meet, and there's a bunch of teenagers. That's it. That's all we got off those guys so far. And then one of them gets eaten while water skiing. so this scene, then this is the one, Drew, that you were talking about. Can you tell us about the amazing water skiing boat explosion scene in a way that makes sense to us?
Let's see here. Well, first of all, obviously you have this beautiful young girl water skiing. Her friend is piloting the boat, skiing along, doing a good job of it, oblivious to the fact that there is a giant fin that pops up out of the water. And this is something that I saw lampooned a bazillion times as a kid. Like this was a much homaged, much parodied sequence. So you see this fin come up out of the water, and again the girl's skiing, she's oblivious, and eventually the girl piloting the boat comes to realize that her friend, who is previously skiing behind her, is no longer there. And then so she stops the boat and brings it around, and she's looking for her friend, and she pulls the ski line out of the water, and then a shark, or the shark in this case, pops up out of the water, starts eating her boat, and while they are struggling, and this is an important part, while they are struggling, I forget how, but something catches on fire, which burns.
No. It's not how it goes. She actually wants to hit the shark off the boat, so she grabs the gasoline can, but for whatever reason, it's uncapped.
Whack it in the head with the gasoline can.
It's uncapped, and so she pours gas all over herself before she hits him on the head. Then she shoots him with a flare gun. Right. And lights the whole thing on fire. That's how that happens.
I just have to say, though, again, I love the fact that they gave the shark more of a look than just being a big shark. Like the fact that it's got this sort of, you know, it's like the Phantom of the Opera shark. You know,
I said it was like they kind of Freddied him up.
Yeah. This is truly exploitative because now you got a big shark and he's got a scar.
You know, it's not enough that he's a giant shark. You know, like we've already seen a giant shark. This is a giant shark
just spelled out. You know, girl gets chomped. The girl in the boat picks up a gas can. Oh no! I poured gas all over myself. I mean, at this point, it's really like a Krusty the Clown routine. Because, oh my God! Really... Gas. Oh, now she picked up a flare gun, and then she shoots the flare gun. I mean, this is the most absurd, like truly exploitative, grungy scene. And honestly, I guess to some extent, if the movie had been all just crazy shit like this, I probably would have been okay with it.
Well, there's an equally crazy scene towards the end, which I will get into when we get to that.
It's very much. That's why this movie is way more into horror movies. Like horror movies, especially like in this era, had that same like, and then this happens, and then oh no, that's gonna happen. And that, you know, that's what gives the shark his signature look. But it's still like, really? Like it wasn't, you know, oh, we hit him with the propeller or whatever. It's, hey, he came up on board. Oh no, and we caught him on fire. Actually, that would be something. There's a movie I want to see. A shark that's always on fire. That would be scary. That's
volcano
scary. Yeah.
Fire shark.
It double. Yeah. There you go, Drew. Double if it shoots lava out of its mouth.
Well, I'm already doing my shark. I'm already doing my half shark, half car comic book. So if we do a sequel,
I'm for Fire Shark, the shark that burns. If somebody nobody steal that on internet land. Fire Shark, the shark that burns. Somehow or another, we need to do this.
You know, I will say this, you talk about this being more of a horror movie, except, I would agree with that, except there is not a single sequence in this movie that is as terrifying as the opening sequence in Jaws.
No, you're right.
Oh,
you're precisely correct.
Well, it's not a great horror movie. I'm just saying that
we already talked about that. It's a B movie.
It follows the beats of a horror movie a lot closer than Jaws, which was never it was meant to be a thriller, you know. I think that's the thing.
Thriller, horror movie, that's a fine line to begin with in a lot of cases.
Yeah, but I mean, you got to admit that a thriller is a different thing. Like, you're never going to accuse, you know,
Cape Fear
as a
well, like that's why I say it's a fine line in some cases. I think, like I said, to me, Jaws is a monster movie more than a thriller. That's always been my opinion.
But here's what makes a great film. I mean, and this is not Jason talking. There's this old formula that a great movie, no matter what kind of movie, giant or whatever, is like. I think it's one great scene and no bad ones. Maybe it's 3 great scenes and no bad ones. But very key to that is no bad ones. So Jaws, it just happens to be, is a really, really good horror, thriller, monster movie, but it's also a great movie. You know, it has at least one great scene. You know, which is the whole Indianapolis thing, just sends vibes out that knocks over other films in its wake. So it's a great movie. This has no great scenes, none, and it has a couple of bad scenes. You know, and I would go so far as to say that the fire scar scene is probably a bad scene. You know, I mean, it's.
But the skiing thing leading up to it is pretty good. You got to give that credit. Credit where credit's due. That's memorable.
The water skier.
Yeah.
I mean, well, the whole business with the old lady, like the little girl, the teenage girl waving at her friend, and then the couple's over there, and then the lady's watching from her balcony, and then all of a sudden all this stuff happens, and then they're kind of like, what the hell just happened? The boat blew up. So the kind of the surrounding stuff is okay.
By the way, I love the place. I have to say, though, once again, even though this is not literally the same location.
No, but it is. I think a lot of it's the same, because when you're looking at the filming locations on IMDb, it says, most of it says Martha's Vineyard, and then there's some things that say Florida.
Well,
and by the way, I want to say this. Apparently, a lot of it was filmed in the winter, and they'd actually have to the actors had to suck on ice cubes so that their breath wouldn't show, because of how cold they were.
Right, because then their breath wouldn't. Yeah, boy. I mean, I love the sense of place, though. There are very few movies that give you this wonderful, just feeling of a place that's not the place that you live in, and so it really there's a strong identity to Amity Island. So to some extent, I would watch it no matter what, just because I love movies that show an interesting community. Okay, so really quickly, two things wash up shore. First is a killer whale that's been nearly bitten in half. And
which is ridiculous because whales are predators.
It's an orca. It is just like the one that was in the movie starring Richard Harris, and I can only think this is just some big sort of ham-handed FU to the guys who made Orca. That's my only interpretation of this.
Mm-hmm.
And then we meet a character that we think is going to be in the rest of the film, which is a sarcastic and argumentative female marine biologist who is just as knowledgeable as the chief and more so, and is not ready to take his guff. And then she is never seen again. But for a brief moment, you're thinking that Richard Dreyfuss has been replaced by, Rachel Dreyfuss, who's going to be this girl marine biologist who's going to be his alter ego. I wanted that to happen. In my mind, there is another movie that starts here and goes different places, but no, it's not to be. They give us no more movie. It's almost as though the writers were thinking of something here, wrote a scene, and then abandoned whatever it was that they were going to do with that. So out she goes, whoever she was.
Those pages were burned in the shark boating accident. And never to be seen again. Well, sorry, your pages were burned when we burnt the shark to make him look more like Two-Face.
He is. Okay, we're going to call him Two-Face from now on. We'll call him Harvey Dent. Okay.
Harvey Fent.
Harvey
I was going to say Sharky Dent, but that works too.
All right.
Oh, the puns.
Yes. All right. So the killer whale, blah, blah, blah. And then, basically, the chief is still not sure what happened to the lady who set herself on fire. But then he notices a chunk of the boat floating in the water, so he wades out, and we're afraid that maybe he's going to lose a foot or something. And instead, he grabs, and in a truly, truly exploitative horror movie moment, the likes of which was never seen in the first movie, he grabs the boat, and the burnt, crisp body of the woman that set the shark on fire springs up.
And that's not true. We had the scene with the head in the port window in the first movie. It's the same thing.
Well, that was a classier head. I don't know.
That was a pretty good movie moment though when he pulls up.
Yeah, I'm going to swim with Jason on this one. This is quite a bit grosser than that.
Yeah, it was a good movie. That was a pretty good moment where he's like, "Oh my god!" His reaction is pretty good. Hey, look, what's that? Oh my god, that's a person. And his reaction and his grossed outness is really pretty
good. First of all, Julia's
actually.
right. The original one was a totally exploitative moment. She's totally right. But my god, yes, this is a good jump shock. It totally is. Totally. I was, so far the two things that have made me totally glad I'm watching this movie are the moment when the woman absurdly sets herself on fire and the moment when her crispy body springs out of the water. So far, this does not bode well.
Which makes it known that sharks don't like barbecue.
Yes. Oh, my God, death watch. So from now on, Brody is nutso. He goes to the mayor and he says there might be a shark. The mayor's like la 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 because the mayor doesn't realize.
I think they'd be I think they should have, if you're going to take it that far, they should have gone well, how can you make sure this is a shark? I mean, she was burned up. Do sharks set people on fire? which then would lead really well into Fire Shark, the shark that burns.
You could probably figure out some kind of Vietnam experimentation, have Caribbean in there thing where it's like a napalm shark that. Well,
see, I'm afraid that since there are fire tornadoes that you see, that the Sharknado guys will hear this and just make Sharknado 3 be a fire tornado.
The napalm shark from Vietnam, the Viet Cong napalm shark, just sounds like.
All right, guys, save it for when we actually do Sharknado.
Yes, okay. So now Brody climbs up into a tower. And this is wonderful, okay, because we're coming up nearly towards the middle of the movie. So Brody is now up on his tower scanning the horizon for sharks. And here's the great part. The mayor and Joe Mascolo, the real estate guy who is the employer of the chief's wife, are walking around, showing around rich hoity-toity people who are going to invest in condominiums. And they look up, and they're like, the chief is up there on his tower looking for sharks. That goddamn son of a bitch, go get him down. I mean, it is the most absurd, appalling thing where you know, they're like, it is so embarrassing that he is looking for sharks. It is the way the characters act in this film has like zero to do with human people, and more to do with just taking the way that they acted in the first movie and sort of amping it up to a degree that is almost parody. I mean, truly, it's almost a joke, and that like.
Well, the fact that he starts shooting up the beach is
yes.
almost veering into. Because you know what's it gonna do? What's it gonna do? I mean, if the shark is anything like the shark in the first one, you know, he knows that the shooting it's not gonna really do much.
Remember he filled his bullets with cyanide.
That's right. There's
cyanide
bullets.
Yeah. No, you're right. He made dum-dum bullets, you know, where filled with cyanide, so that they'll blow a big freaking hole in anything he shoots, and also splatter cyanide all over it. He doesn't. He doesn't. Yeah. Well, you know, but
poison bullets are like, it's not like darts.
Right.
Like a bullet works. Oh man, I don't know.
Well,
poison bullets sounds
wax,
hilarious.
but I have a feeling that the travel would probably melt the wax. I mean, I don't know. You know, who knows? I don't know.
Well, the bottom line is
really,
they make
really
such
funny.
a big to-do about it that you'd think it would be in more than one scene, but this
doesn't pay off. It doesn't pay off. He's making the dum-dum bullets. He's hiding them. You know, he doesn't let his deputies see them. His deputy's like super interested in what he's doing with the bullets. He hides them in like a leather thing, and he takes them home and he stashes them in his bathtub. Which I'm actually surprised that stayed in when you think about it. They could have edited that out and he would have never been the wiser. He just would have been shooting up the beach with regular bullets. It makes no sense at all. It's yet another thing like the female marine biologist that looks like a piece of an early outline that just somehow got ditched.
Well, we've missed
anyway.
That that's his hobby, like filling bullets with things.
Yeah.
Like, there was a time he filled bullets with, like, nerds, and the other time he filled the bullets with, like, Whitman Sampler, and, like, this is his secret shame. That's why he hides it.
He filled them with silver for werewolf shark.
Yeah. See, that would
werewolf
be cool. Actually,
shark.
that would be cooler if he had made silver bullets, and they're like, but this is a shark. He's like, you can never tell.
You raise a valid point that if a werewolf bites a shark, does it in fact become a were?
Ooh, that's a good one.
See,
another movie. Yeah, another thing for the internet land to not do. Were shark.
Here's what I'm seeing. The fact that all of these things sound kind of more enjoyable than what we actually saw.
Wait.
It says a lot.
Were shark versus fire shark.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Any of these are better than 2 and definitely 3. So
now I have a true fondness for
why God why?
Because I'm happy that the porpoises survive at the end, but
what?
At the end they're afraid that their little pet dolphins have gotten eaten,
I
but
don't remember
they
that.
turn up, and that's the big payoff is
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Mike and his girlfriend and their pet dolphin have made it okay. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Right now, so the chief goes shooting at what he thinks is a shark. It's a bunch of bluegills. He scares the living daylights out of everybody on the beach in a rehash of what happened in the first movie. And I realized I said I want a movie just like the first movie, and now I'm complaining about everything they do that rehashes the first one. And that's why it's so thankless to try to do this. But he is fired. The town fathers basically call a meeting and say, we're embarrassed by you. There is no shark.
Well, he brings a photo that he thinks proves that there is a shark from the camera of the divers, but they don't see the shark, and frankly, neither did I in that picture.
Well, they are completely incapable. But the thing is, they're not going to listen to him no matter what he says. And and they have the memory of a gypsy moth, basically. So they're just simply not, they're not going to keep him around. They fire him. He gets drunk, and somehow the movie keeps going, because immediately what happens is the effect of him being fired never pays off in any sense at all, because immediately the next day, his teenage son and his younger son sneak out with a bunch of other teenagers and go out in the water and start encountering sharks. And what happens for the rest of the movie is we go back and forth between the Mike story, the teenagers on the boats, and the chief trying to get a hold of various boats and other means of going out to help the teenagers. The fact that he's been fired as chief does not interfere with any of this plot.
Yeah, you're right. So it would have been interesting to have the guy in the helicopter, the guy that's supposed to take the helicopter up, say, "Sorry, chief, but I can't do that. I've heard that you've been fired, and I can't be taking orders from you."
Right.
Then we would have got to see the glory of a shark eating a helicopter.
Okay,
and so that's my point, is that there could have been conflict around.
No, but so yes, I want to get to the shark eating, get straight to that, in fact. But I wanted to say, it's basically what happens in this movie and the way that it's constructed. And I know as a writer what it's like to actually do this. Sometimes your plot is having a hard time holding together, and you just have one thing happen after another, and it doesn't actually affect the flow of the story. And that's really depressing, because it means, well, what was the point of me watching that? And what was the point of me watching that? And I have to say, though, I like the stuff when we go back to the teenagers, because the teenagers, they're going to go out. They go out sailing, and immediately while they're out there, they start encountering the shark. Now, Tina, the girl who was waving at her friend who was water skiing, she has one of the first really harrowing teenage adventures where she and her boyfriend, they take a different route. They're by themselves, and they get attacked by the shark. And she is the best hysterical child I've ever seen. She's like 17 or whatever, but her boyfriend gets knocked out of the boat and eaten, and
that was actually pretty solid, because the shark, not only does he get eaten, but it pulls him and slams him into the side of the boat,
which I totally believe.
That was pretty harrowing. Actually, that's one of the best. I think that's one of the best scenes, if not the best scene as far as horror scenes go. That was pretty solid.
But it does owe a lot to the opening sequence of the original.
And then you don't know what happens to her, and so then when they find the boat later on, and Brody gets on it, then you just hear her crying hysterically, and he's like, "Oh, there's somebody here," and she's hiding kind of in the whatever, I guess it's not really cabin, but whatever it is. And then when they pull her up, she just starts screaming shark, and you're kind of afraid that the shark.
Her scream of the word shark is really great.
Because you really think that it's right there. Like I actually thought that she was saying that because it was right behind them.
Well, I didn't think that, but I did think that. I just thought it was truly amazing how she just sort of pulls out the word shark over the course of 12 seconds. It's an amazing reading of the word shark.
There's a lot of really good people enacting trauma and the effects of trauma. I do feel like that they're this woman, and actually the way that Brody is portrayed throughout the movie. I really do feel like that was effectively conveyed here. A lot of movies completely gloss over that. People have something horrible happen to them, and the next sequence they're acting like an action hero. Or you look at other sequels. Somebody's had, especially in horror movies, where they bring back a character. A character lives through one of these horror movie scenarios, and they don't seem traumatized at all by it. And here, you really do get the sense that Brody is very much haunted by the events of the first Jaws.
Definitely.
I got to give him credit for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, he does. He's very strong. I think that Scheider is consistently, you believe him as a character. There's not a moment when I don't believe anything that Roy Scheider is doing, even when he's doing truly absurd things, like the whole, ingenious payoff at the end. which I don't know. I mean, I suppose it works, but that's all. That's fine. He's really good. There's no doubt the fact that Roy Scheider is the best actor in this picture. But okay, so we've got the teens. Tina gets eaten, and later when they find her, her boyfriend gets eaten, and she's screaming a lot. Meanwhile, the rest of the teens are all together, and what I love, their storyline is really cool. I mean, I won't get into great detail about the fact that basically what's going on during all this is that we keep cutting back to Roy Scheider finding his way to go out onto the water and getting confused about where to go and so forth. But with the teens, what's great about the teens is that as soon as their boats are disabled, they start trying to make a plan for where exactly they're going to try to make landfall to avoid just floating out into the ocean. And also the fact that they're driving a bunch of small sailboats. And so what they do is, since half of them are crippled, they just lash them all together into a big sort of barge. And
which is pretty ingenious.
It's very ingenious. And this barge is really interesting to watch. Go ahead, Tony.
Again, with the coulda, shoulda, woulda, it actually, another good movie, and they kind of do it it's like half a good movie, right? Is they could have taken that, a bunch of teens come to the town, it's mostly shut down, they're like, screw this, let's go out in the water. And the movie could have been all these teens dealing with basically the teen version of what Quint dealt with in the first movie, in his story, Yeah. And that would have been a pretty good movie, maybe even better because we don't have all the problems with the mayor forgetting that there was a shark attack and all that stuff. That could have been a really actually harrowing movie that would have, not had to hit all the beats from the first one, et cetera.
And isn't that essentially open water?
Yeah,
well,
but before that. So.
But I mean, it have different business in it though, Drew, because open water had open water has the people floating and they don't even have a boat. And this,
also it's not a bunch of teens on a boat having to deal with teen stuff as well.
But they do cool stuff. I mean, so yeah, Tony, you're exactly right. I mean, to a great extent, even though Roy Scheider is the finest actor in this movie,
sure,
the teen storyline is the only one that is really different, and you're not sure what the hell is going to happen. And I like all the business of how hard it, they've got their stuff together and they pretty much know what they're doing, and they've built this jury-rigged, island of boats, and then a helicopter comes.
Well, and they look out for each other. They're not. I mean, even though you have, and again with the storylines that kind of get introduced and then there's no follow through. There was that whole issue of the girl at the beginning where she kind of likes Mike, but the other guy thought that she was going to be with him. So you kind of think that's going to go somewhere. There's going to be some kind of rivalry that will eventually cause somebody's death. But no, that doesn't happen. They end up looking out for each other, and it's all good.
Right.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the thing.
Kids working together.
There's a whole after-school special movie, and then
there's
the cop part, which is kind of a holdover from the first one.
Yeah,
so,
and I'm with you. I think you're right that it's very much like an after-school special, and it's fantastic that way. They've even got the kid who's tagged along, the little kid, and they look out for him. These are the best. These are the best.
The way they look out for Sean is so great. I love that part.
So, they hilariously, a helicopter comes by to pick them up. I think this is just so delightful. It's like maybe there's probably one writer who came on late in the game and just wrote in a bunch of absurd sequences that he knew would be hilarious. In this one, a helicopter comes by that the chief has sent, and they're like, oh, we're saved. The first time an adult comes by and they feel like, oh, we're saved. This time, he's like, here, I'll throw a rope. I'll tow you to the little island. But the shark eats the helicopter.
That is pretty, actually, when it pulls it, at first you're like, this is really kind of crazy and ridiculous. But when it does pull it in the water and blades are flying everywhere.
Yes. And
that actually ends up being kind of cooler than it seems like it should be because it's pretty insane. But
again with the deleted scenes that I wish they would have left in though, there was a sequence where they had the helicopter pilot still inside that sort of glass dome that those little helicopters have, and he's conscious and awake in there, and he's looking down because he's hanging upside down as the shark bangs its head against the. It was so even just as a rough cut deleted scene, it was very creepy, and I was like, man, I wish they would have.
Yeah, they said that the screenplay originally had him surviving because he was breathing off like an oxygen hose or whatever, and that he even saves the girl, one of the girls that ends up getting killed in the screenplay that they had first. I don't know why they decided not to do that.
Well, both of those things sound fantastic. I mean, what you just mentioned, that sounds truly fantastic. Him being underwater. I think it sounds great. I mean, what the actual payoff, of course, is that the death of this guy is not important. What ends up being important is that the rotor blades fly and further damage the raft that these guys have built, so they have to rebuild it. That's the hilarious thing. First time an adult comes along, they're like, we're saved, and all it does is make their situation worse because the only competent people in this movie are the teenagers. And they, one of the girls gets eaten in the process of them trying to put it all back together, and they spend a long time lashing the boat up yet again, just in time for yet another helpful adult to show up. And this time, it's our friend Roy Scheider, who literally manages to make it all the way out to them and immediately wrecks his own boat on the island that they're trying to get to.
And let me say about that thing, that Junction Island or whatever,
yes.
That was actually constructed for the movie.
This thing that he lashes on, yeah.
Junction Island, whatever. They actually made it for the movie out of, like, plastic. So it was the biggest pain because anybody who tried to grab onto it or walk on it would slip and fall. It ended up being the worst thing. And then at one point it floated off, like when they weren't attending to it, it floated off toward Cuba. So they had to go back and get it. Anyway, so that was funny.
Yeah.
And they also constructed the lighthouse, actually, for the film.
There's a lot of great sets. I mean, when you think about it, this boat, this lashed together. Hello?
Hello?
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
I'm sorry, I lost somebody.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah. The lashed together boat. Well, I know.
Did a shark bite the cable to your phone? That's what we want to know.
Yes. But that's a set, really, and it's a wonderful one because we get to see these teenagers as they move around and so forth. Anyway, now that it's right at the end that Brody wrecks his boat on Cable Junction, and now they all start trying to get to the island, some of them by swimming to it, some of them by rowing towards it, and here's where we finally come up on the final suspense of dealing with, will the shark eat the teenagers before they can all safely get to this Cable Junction Island, which is attached to an enormous power cable that was basically tweaked to us early in the movie, let us know that it was there. In this case, now, Roy Scheider has dredged it up, and in the same sense that before, Roy Scheider crawled into a useful place and waited until the shark came towards him so that he could shoot him because the shark was holding a compressed air tank. This time, Roy Scheider crawls out onto this electrical power cable, and he has his feet on a rubber raft in the water, and he's banging on the cable to distract it from the teenagers. And Julia, did you get the impression that he knows what's going to happen? Is this really, truly Roy Scheider's plan, is that he's going to just bite down this thing?
Yeah, well, that's the thing is, I think that is his plan, but I don't see how he could have survived that because he's holding on to the thing, the cable, and then he backs away just as the shark is biting toward him. But if you look at the scene, if they haven't, cut away from him doing that, there's no way that shark doesn't at least chomp off his arm, and for sure he's going to catch fire too, along with the shark. Anyway, I thought that was very interesting.
So
that was a missed opportunity. That was a missed opportunity to me. One things that we come to think of with sequels, and certainly doing sequels to horror films was something that really kind of came of age big time in the 80s. Is repeating a line or something over and over and over again. And I really thought he should have said, "Smile, you son of a bitch," again.
Yes, I agree.
And then martyred himself. I think he should have died. I think he should have sacrificed himself at that moment by, like, because I don't see how he survives that. I really don't. So I
certainly would have made Jaws' Revenge make more sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. He because what actually happens, since we haven't quite described it yet, he's there and he goes, come on, whatever, and the shark leaps out of the water and bites down on the cable in order to attempt to bite Roy Scheider in half. Roy Scheider leaps backward so that the shark just bites down on a big cable and sets itself on fire. Now, I do completely believe the way that the shark burns up to a crisp, and that's because, you know, if you've ever witnessed what a bug looks like when it gets into one of those electrical grids, you know, remember the bug zappers that people used to sell? And I think they don't anymore because they're just insanely cruel even to bugs. But it's, you know, it just turns them into a piece of charcoal. So, yes, the shark lights up like a matchstick, and that's the end of the movie. That's literally the end of the movie. We had cut back, by the way, to a couple of things in there. The town fathers decided that they were sorry. They should have believed Roy Scheider, you know, before teenagers started getting killed. But it doesn't even matter. In this, in the end, you know, he gets the shark to bite the cable, and that's truly the end. So, in fact, I don't even remember if there are any scenes after the shark eats the cable.
It's pretty much over.
Else?
No. They're gonna paddle. They're gonna limp back to civilization. I think.
Yeah, he puts the little boy and the girl who's been screaming her head off into this little rubber raft, and then that's it.
Yeah, they just wait because they're gonna get saved sometime because they're out on the cable junction. And by the way, since they of course had the shark bite the big power line, one can only presume that they have now plunged Amity Island into a blackout.
That's what I think.
Just truly dealing it like that. That's it for Amity. You know, there you go.
And it was the origin of Fire Shark.
Exactly. The only thing missing from that sequence, the way it's cut, and just that's why it's so. Another thing that's just so like, wow, this is, you know, definitely not done by Spielberg, is the only thing that was missing was like if they showed the sharks like bones through it, like with the traditional electrified, like
that would have been awesome.
Because the way it's cut is like it cuts back and forth really rapidly, and there's fire in the background and all this stuff, and you're just like, really? Like that's what. You know,
my daughter observed that there was smoke coming out of his eyes or whatever.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, like I said,
awesome.
the only thing that's missing is just.
I would like to talk about something very briefly that surrounds this movie and the last one. But so upon researching on the internet the Jaws movies for doing these last two podcasts, it's come to my attention that there is a vast online fandom for the Jaws franchise that calls themselves Finheads. And there's actually an internal debate over whether or not it is the same shark in every movie. What do you guys think about that? Is it a ghost shark?
Like a la Michael Myers or whatever?
Yeah, like an undead shark that keeps resurrecting.
Well, I mean, I'd love to read somebody's theory on that. That sounds like a lot of fun. I mean,
this one maybe gets electro. The other one blew up though. Like,
well, you know, if it's a ghost shark.
Again, ghost shark is still scarier than what's in this one. Even though he is, you know, Sharky Dent. So, but yeah, I guess it could. Why not?
No, I mean,
guess
clearly not.
Answer.
But, you know, I mean, absolutely not. First of all, absolutely is the same shark. But I can totally.
But again, why not? If Michael Myers and Jason are the same guy.
This is an argument that basically just like the sort of extra-textual arguments that James Bond is a title, and so.
Well, I totally believe that.
You know,
well, Jaws is a title because whichever I tend to refer to whichever shark is in one of these movies is Jaws,
right.
And actually, I will impart that title onto sharks in lesser shark movies. Like I nicknamed all the sharks in Sharknado Jaws. So there you go.
Well, okay, there you go. I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, I like the idea of an argument like that. I love the concept where people look at something and come up with an argument beyond the text that makes the work more interesting to contemplate than it is on its own. Because as it is on its own, I think Tony said it exactly right. There's, as we're thinking about this movie, there's almost 1,000 things that are more interesting to think about than the things that actually happen in this movie. To me, the single most interesting thing about this movie was how every single one of these teenagers knew a hell of a lot about seamanship. I mean, they all knew all of these knots. In other words, Quint would have loved these teenagers. I mean, seriously.
Not a city hand among them.
Right, exactly. and that was really cool. Even the rich teenagers still know their seamanship.
Especially the rich ones, because that's all they do is boat.
No, but
I
love. Yeah, well, it's a good point, and I love all the class stuff too. I love the business of one kid feels down on himself. That girl's not going to like me because I live here on the island all year round. One of those beautiful places in the world that everybody would love to live all year round, but the fact that he's born there means that he's there just by birth and not because he's rich. And so he's a townie. He doesn't actually have any money. I found that fascinating. I mean, I found that, that's all really, really great stuff. So I don't know. Anyway, we're definitely coming up on that time. So why don't we get to our final thoughts, and then we'll come around again for endorsements. So let's go in the same order. So, Julia, what are your final thoughts on Jaws 2?
Well, you guys have convinced me that it's not as good a movie as I thought it was. But I don't think it's a terrible movie. I feel pretty solidly that it's a strong B movie, and it's flawed, but that's okay. But I enjoyed it, and I'm glad we watched it. So yeah, that's all.
Very good. Let's see. What order did we go in before?
It was me,
Drew.
then Tony.
Okay, so Drew, final thoughts. Jaws 2.
You know what? If I was not looking at this, we've attacked this for the last hour or so critically, which I am perfectly capable of doing, as I've proven. It is not as good as the original Jaws, but really what could be. But if I am to just turn off my critic brain and just watch this movie, it's passable entertainment. None of the stuff that is dumb about it is so dumb that it makes me want to throw my hands up in the air and scream at the TV. So it's passable entertainment, and as that, it's good enough. If you're going to sit there and pick it apart the way we have, which is kind of our job on this show, then it's not as good as the original Jaws, and there's a lot of things that it could have been better. But it's still better than a hell of a lot of there's a lot of these killer shark movies. Sci-Fi Channel seems to churn one of them out every week. And most of them aren't as good as this. It's not as good as some of the other Jaws ripoffs, like as Tony mentioned, Piranha is a better movie than this. But in the killer shark genre, it's good enough.
Outstanding. All right, Tony, final thoughts, Jaws 2?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Drew. Again, we've probably savaged it a little bit more than it needs to be. It's a decent B movie. It's got, there's some great acting. There's nothing where it's bad. I think it's just unfortunate that it's the sequel to a really much better movie, and didn't improve on that. As far as horror movies goes, man, there's so much worse than this movie, and with way more ridiculousness and terrible effects and everything. This is by far, leaps and bounds above a lot of things. It's just, comparatively speaking, it's really tough. And, perhaps because of that, we've been a little bit harder. But I think its worst crime is just being, mediocre. You don't really remember it, but everybody's doing a really good job, and they have, a decent shark, and it looks kind of crazy because it's burned, and, they try to do that. They turned it into Sharky Dent, and that was cool. And, so it's not bad by any stretch. It's just, it kind of is what it is. It's certainly better than the sequels past this. I mean, that was really, it's funny that Jump the Shark doesn't reference the sequels. It actually references Happy Days, because that's certainly where the sequels are headed when they decided to do the third one in 3D. In the even the bad 3D at the time, you know. So it's good, it's fun. Would I watch it all the time? No, definitely. But, you know, is it bad? No, it's a good B movie that, you know, with some good actors, you know.
Well said. Yeah, so my final thoughts are very much the same. I am going to be quite forgiving towards the movie because it is a very competent, you know, well-made thriller. It just so happens that it's a perfectly passable thriller that just happens to have a lot of the same characters and similar situations as a truly great American film. And that's sort of an unhappy place for any movie to be, you know. But there are things I like about it. But yeah, it's funny. You would almost forget that it exists if it weren't called Jaws. It would just be this obscure 1970s adventure film that you would, I mean, Jaws 2, that we would have rediscovered and gone, huh, what an interesting little adventure film. This is wild.
Although it does again have one of the best, you know, it did create a really, really great tagline.
Yeah. Just when you
that's pretty awesome.
Well, and the thing that I wanted to say really, really sincerely is that I do think it's possible to make a great sequel to a great film. You know, or
Jason.
Yeah.
Bride of Frankenstein. Better than the original.
Godfather 2. I mean, there are, you know, Empire Strikes Back. You can do sequels that definitely live up to the legend of your first movie. So it's not impossible, but
Friday the 13th Part 4.
You have to catch up to basically what made the original great. That's the thing that's valid. You have to pay close attention, and you have to go, is it this thing that I want to copy? Is it this thing that I want to copy, or is it this? And it may be that only one of those things is what truly captures the essence, and the rest will just be a waste of your time. You know, and I don't know what those things are, but it's definitely possible. In the same way that you hear people lazily saying, hey, they shouldn't do sequels, or hey, they shouldn't do remakes. Hey, some of the best movies ever made are remakes, you know. The Maltese Falcon is a remake, you know, and so I would never be saying...
But you don't mean the Maltese Falcon that was a remake of the Maltese Falcon.
I mean the Maltese Falcon with Humphrey Bogart is a
right.
remake.
I'm just saying, because they made it yet again, and that was not...
Really?
superior.
You saw a remake of the Maltese Falcon?
Yeah, of course.
With whom?
Isn't it Denzel Washington or somebody? Who is it? Somebody help me. Do you guys remember?
Serious? There's a remake of Maltese Falcon with Denzel Washington?
No, don't quote me on Denzel Washington, but it's from the last couple decades.
In the Hollywood of Julia's mind, there's a really cool movie.
I'd actually totally watch a remake of the Maltese Falcon with Denzel Washington.
Yes.
He would be awesome in the bogey role.
Absolutely, of course.
All right, who is it? Now I've got to look it up, damn it. All right, whatever.
Are you thinking of the remake of Casablanca with David Soul?
No, I'm not. I thought it was not talking. Maybe I'm.
That's not as good as you might hope it is.
David Soul doesn't look a thing like Denzel Washington, Jason.
No, I know what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of the Manchurian Candidate. That's what it was. Never mind.
Right.
Who was in that?
With Liev Schreiber.
Liv Schreiber, Sabretooth.
I don't know. Can we just erase that part? We'll fix this in post-production, like I always say.
The level of confusion enshrouds us all.
I'm sorry.
Except Drew, who's got his story straight. All right.
It's the clarity of madness that I have.
Okay. Let's do endorsements. That is, if you have any. If you don't, it's perfectly fine. Julia, did you have...
I endorsed the Maltese Falcon with Denzel Washington. No, I would love to add my endorsement to all the other people who have endorsed Boyhood, Richard Linklater's Boyhood. It's such a great movie. I don't know why it's in limited release. It should be everywhere. It's so cool. Made over a period of 12 years with the same actors. And just brilliant. Made me miss Austin, Texas so much. You guys are lucky to live there, although I feel pretty lucky to live in Denver as well. So, yeah, that's my one.
Outstanding. Drew, did you have any endorsements for us this week?
Well, first off, I want to make a shout-out to the Monsters and Metal podcast, which is done by Decapitated Dan. I just recorded every Halloween. I always feel like, I know monsters. I don't know metal. Every time I've done a segment for the show, which I do it, they record me every year to do around Halloween for very obvious reasons. And obviously I know my monsters. Metal, I'm always kind of wishing that I had like a tiny Tony sitting on my shoulder.
Well, I'm going like, hey, wait, how do I get on that?
I'll let you. They probably totally love to have you on that. Let me set that up. We'll make that happen.
That sounds awesome. I'm and I haven't listened to this, and so I'm like, where Monsters and Metal? Where have you been in my life? That's the two things I love. That's my Reese's right there. There's like peanut butter, chocolate. Monsters
I will
Metal?
make this happen. But you should check it out if you like either Monsters or Metal or both, because I would think your enjoyment would be greatly enhanced if you like both. Secondly, the fourth Comixology issue. Wow, I got an echo on that. The fourth Comixology issue of the ongoing Halloween Man is out. Is the epilogue to our first story arc, which has gotten a lot of attention, more attention than I had even anticipated, because it deals with body image and weight issues and female image and throughout the media and everything. And it's been interesting to see the reactions to it. And like I said, the final part of that is out today. Or it was out last week, I should say. It's on Comixology. You can get it for $1.99, and it's been really interesting seeing the reactions of it. Some of the criticisms of it, because this is such a touchy subject, that I found that it's even making certain fans uncomfortable having to now talk about these issues, which means we've done our job. So. Please go check it out. Download it. If you hate it, go on the Halloween Man Facebook and tell me that you hate it. Or if you like it, go on Halloween Man Facebook and tell me that you like it. Or if you just think it's so, whatever. We love feedback. And again, 70 pages, $1.99. That's a good deal. And coming up, we got all kinds of good stuff from that. So you'll be primed and ready for what's coming up, including our giant-sized Halloween issue and our vampire storyline that starts immediately after the Halloween issue. So bone up right now.
Outstanding. Tony, do you have any endorsements for us?
I'm drawing a blank, but I do want to give a shout-out instead to, I was lucky enough to catch the band Final Drive this weekend, and their lead singer Jordan I met up with the band, and he's like, "Oh man, I've been listening to the podcast," and he was totally geeking out. So we got to geek out about movies, and it's kind of cool. Like, we do our thing, and then we kind of put it out on the internet, and to have somebody that's talking and enjoying what we do, that's really, really cool. So
you're telling me that somebody's actually listening to us? Oh my gosh.
Exactly. Well, Rain always, Rain's always like, hey, who cares about you guys talking about horror movies? Really?
Thanks, Rain.
And I'm like, some people do. Well, she doesn't mean it like that, but when you know somebody, it's one of those things of like, wow, people want to listen to you talk about things.
Really?
Weird.
Well, it really wasn't until recently on Facebook that we started to get a lot of feedback, and up at that point, I have to say, I was right with your wife. I wasn't sure whether anybody listened to it or not.
We appreciate whoever's out there listening. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. We've actually had, a bunch of people because I was there was because of a thing I work with, Voodoo Queen Management, and there's a lot of people, and I met Final Drive through them, too. And, they were like, wow, yeah, Monsters and Metal as well goes hand in hand there. But it was really cool, talking to somebody who's like, oh, man, I was listening to the podcast, and we actually, I liked this episode and, what they liked about it and stuff. So I'm going to have to give it up for Jordan and the dudes in Final Drive for kind of making my weekend by geeking out again with me about the podcast. So I thought that was really, really cool. And like I said, we also shout out to Voodoo Queen, because there's a bunch of people on there who are like, wait, that's the thing I like too. So maybe they'll check out the Monsters of Metal podcast as well, because that fits really well.
That's really great. All right, my only endorsement is I haven't really been reading or watching nearly enough lately because I've been busy trying to finish a book, so I apologize about that. But we have started watching an episode or two a night, honestly, of House of Cards. And
binge watching, baby.
Yeah, and I've been really impressed. What's really funny about it is that despite what anybody may have told you about House of Cards, nothing really happens in it. I mean, it is a Washington-based drama, but it is like nobody's so far anyway, no spoilers, but I mean, nobody's getting shot, no cars are blowing up, no assassinations, nothing. Basically, it's just a bunch of drama. It's like West Wing without the clever lines, and yet
Scandal.
It's like Scandal without the scandals.
No, there's plenty of scandals. They just haven't been made public.
I'm saying House of Cards, a show that should be honestly a little dull, except for that Kevin Spacey is really so good that you're just fine. You're fine with it. It's like, I'll watch Kevin Spacey be a jerk to people in Washington. So it's interesting in that it gives this view of Washington that is insanely cynical and dark, maybe true, maybe not. But so I love it, despite the fact that it's difficult to describe exactly what is interesting about it. So that's a terrible, terrible recommendation of House of Cards. But nevertheless, that's what I'm going to go with. So
it's good.
Thank you very, very much, everybody, for tuning in to our episode on Jaws 2. We will be back next week with something that's very special that is several things. First of all, is a kickoff to an extremely anticipated series of films. This is going to be the Exorcist series, and I'm so happy about that. But it is also
movie of all time.
It is also the number 100 in our episode.
Woo!
It is literally the 100th episode, this sort of blows my mind that there is like essentially 100 hours of all of us just talking about horror movies. So, yeah. So that's it. So we will see you next week. Please come to the Facebook page. Tell us what you think. Tell your friends. Listen to us on Stitcher. Leave us a review on iTunes because that helps people find the show. Thank you so much. Everybody have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next week.
Night, John Boy.
Bye.
Night.